Well, hello, welcome to episode 155 of the Confident Live Marketing Podcast. In today's episode, we're talking about how to work out your perfect audience. And when I say we, it's not really me at all. It's my friend Shelley Röstlund, who is going to help us navigate this difficult area, because it's something that a lot of people struggle with over the years. I remember going to a conference back in 2015 where there was a big kind of conversation about how do you find your perfect audience? And well, if I choose this type of person for my perfect audience, then what about all these other people that are not in that? What's going to happen? Anyway, enough of me gibbering. It's time to bring in Shelley. Shelley, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Hello. I was just checking my phone is off.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, it's always good to check that. Now, I was supposed to be going live to Amazon, but it's not seemed to be working, which is... Oh, I know why. Oh, well, never mind. It helps if you actually click the button in Restream to do it. So it's not going to happen today, unfortunately. But we'll always do it next time. How are you doing, Shelley?
Yes, good. Pleased it's not raining.
It's been horrible. I don't know about where it is, what it's been like where you are, but it's been pretty horrible here near Manchester. So it's nice there's a bit of sun. Tell us where you're dialing in from today.
So I'm in Northampton. It's in the middle of the UK, probably the furthest you could get away from the ocean, which is not great for an ocean-loving South African.
Yeah, you didn't pick the right place for that, but it is a nice area. It is a nice area. So
well, we're actually quite close to everything. So you know, an hour each way, you end up in beautiful places. So it's all good. And we're a massive county ourselves, so we've got loads of lovely stuff. And of course, Princess Diana's home's here. So
oh, there you go. I didn't know that.
All thought, yes.
So we've got Lisa Monks in the house from Down Under. Great to see you, Lisa. Hope you're doing well. We miss you. We miss you.
San Diego days.
So I think it's time to get on with the show. What do you think, Shelley? I think
let's crack on, man. There's so many points here.
Exactly. And Shelley she said to me, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but she has copious amounts of notes in front of her, which I was just saying, I wish all my guests were this organized, but there you go. Let's get on with the show. Hello, my name's Ian Anderson-Gray, and in this episode of the Confident Live Marketing Show, we're talking about how to work out your perfect audience. My guest today is Shelley Röstlund. Let's get on with it right now.
Welcome to the Confident Live Marketing Show with Ian Anderson-Gray.
Helping you level up your impact, authority, and profits through the power of confident live video.
Optimize your mindset and communication and increase your confidence in front of the camera.
Get confident with the tech and gear.
And get confident with the content and marketing.
Together, we can go live!
Well, hello, welcome to episode 155 of the Confident Live Marketing Show. Oh, this is exciting. We're talking about how to find out your perfect audience, otherwise known as avatar. So, and we're not talking about blue aliens here. So we're talking about, from a marketing point of view, how do you work out who your audience is when it comes to writing your copy or your live shows or all that kind of thing. So that's what we're going to be talking today. And now I've got a fancy overlay here. I've been fiddling around with tickers on the screen. So if you're listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see this beauty, but playing around with scrolling text on the screen. So I hope you like it if you're watching. We've got some fabulous people watching live. We've got Lisa Monks is in the house. Oh, that's not good. The ticker is going over that. That's not good. Anyway, Lisa's here. We've got Reg in the house watching on YouTube. Looks like we have a lovely guest. We do indeed. And Lisa is saying, love your video, intro video, Ian. Thank you so much, Lisa. We do love that kind of thing. So, yes, a social media marketing world is coming up fairly soon. I think is it next week or the week after? It's very, very soon. And unfortunately, I can't be there this year. This is going to be the first year, apart from last year, which didn't happen for, I don't know, pandemic or something. First time I won't be going since I first attended back in 2015. So yeah, that's kind of sad, but got lots of exciting things coming up. But I think it is time to bring in my good friend Shelley. And Shelley, we didn't meet. We didn't meet in social media marketing world, but I've got a lot of happy memories of hanging out with Shelley in social media marketing world in San Diego. So yeah, we're going to be talking about that. Anyway, enough of me gibbering on. Let's bring in Shelley. Shelley is a systems-led brand strategist who teaches entrepreneurs to transform their business into a momentum-building brand machine using brand archetypes, CX insights, and product refining. She helps them to focus momentum and entice the right clients to join their brand. Welcome to the show, Shelley. We've got to put out the red carpet, and as the crowds die down, welcome to the show, Shelley.
A lot of clapping, man.
There is. Well, we get excited, particularly about the topic today. Because this is something that a lot of people struggle with. When it comes to this. But before we get on to the topic of audiences and stuff, let us know where you're dialing in from. You're from. You said it was the middle of the UK. Just for podcast listeners who've tuned in.
Yeah. So if you're not based in England, you won't know where Northampton is. But yeah, we're in the middle of England, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a lovely place. It's a lovely place to be. Now, I was trying to work out where we actually met because I've got lots of happy memories of hanging out with you and your husband Christian in San Diego. But we were at a conference in London. New Media Europe.
We very first met in 2015 at the big social in Manchester.
Oh, that's right. Of course. How could I forget? In Manchester. And yeah, that's an interesting place. That was a big social media conference, hence the name, big social media conference. And I think it was Melanie Dodoro was there, Mary Smith, Julia Bramble. That was the first time I met Julia.
Jenny Brennan,
yeah.
She was speaking, and the really funny chap from what's the appliance AO. He was amazing.
Oh yes, AO.com. Yeah, that was great. So yes, and we have hung out at Social Media Marketing World. Lisa Monks is saying I'm going to miss everyone this year at Social Media Marketing World. Well, not everyone because we're not going. So, but you'll still miss us.
To be honest, I don't have a lot of FOMO because I really honestly could do without the administration of flying at the moment. So I'm okay.
You're okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. I've decided not to have FOMO, but I will miss people. And I'm looking forward to getting back to traveling. So I'm going to be in Orlando in May for VidFest, and I can't wait because Anyway, so let's talk about audiences. Well, before that, how did you get into what you're doing today? Brand strategy? Yeah.
Well, when I left employment, I mean, I worked in fitness and property industries in London and in South Africa. But when I went self-employed, I first started out as a franchise consultant because that's what I'd spent about 6 years in, and I'd worked in-house with a lawyer within a franchisor. So actually my whole interest in value propositions kind of started then. And I'm a structure girl anyway and a documenter. So structured business formats work really well for me. And then basically I've always been a word geek. So, my creative outlet has always been writing. So comms and communication, and that was always there in the background from an amateur perspective, because then all of a sudden social media exploded and that whole world was introduced to me. So then I basically moved over from franchise consulting into looking at the platforms and seeing how people are using them for business. And long story short, eventually got to here. I've run an agency for about 12 years now. And we specialize particularly in strategy and content marketing for content creators. And that's what we do today.
Which is great. And I love to see what you're doing. You've got your website is amazing. And it's been great to see
the new one?
Yeah, the new one.
Shelley Röstlund. Yeah.
To develop. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But perfect audience, or as some people call it, an avatar.
The avatar.
I've always struggled with avatar, like, because it does feel like that a blue alien thing, and it feels. So I've kind of like preferred to use the phrase perfect audience, but it doesn't really matter, does it? Because what is an avatar and why is it so important?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's important, especially for smaller businesses, is by doing this exercise, you save yourself a world of grief and a world of time and energy. Because as we all know, it takes a long time to create content, good content, not crappy content, I will say. So what you want to be doing is making sure that you're creating the right content for the right people. And that's also going, when I say I'm trying to help people build momentum building machines, it's because it is a machine. There are lots of parts to your machine, and a big part of that is content. So if you don't get that right, you're actually wasting a lot of time and energy and putting the wrong kind of pieces into your machine, if you like. So it is really hard to do, just as it's really hard to even kind of put a brand strategy together for yourself, because it's your business. But if you don't do the exercise, you do end up being quite unfocused. And if you think from a physics perspective, you end up with your energy going, dissipating that way instead of actually being quite focused in one direction, which is how you build momentum.
Absolutely. And I'd love to know from people watching live or the replay, just pop your comments in. Let us know what your thoughts are on this. Have you thought about your avatar and your perfect audience? Because it's something that speaking to a lot of people in marketing and in business in general, they avoid, because you said it's hard work. It's using your brain. It's deep work. And I think you're totally right that sometimes we can be so close to our business that we don't actually know. Like, I remember doing a course where we had to work out our strengths, and I couldn't think of any of my strengths. So I had to ask my wife, like what are my strengths? And it was because I was too close to myself and I couldn't think. And can we do this on our own, or how do we actually go about doing this?
You can do it on your own, but I think it does help if you potentially do it with someone. But I think the other thing you can do is, if you are really struggling to start, if you've already got a couple of, so when we create an avatar, you're basing it on your dream customer or your ideal client. Okay. And ideal doesn't mean that that's the only client you'll ever have, but it's like the client that you'd love to replicate and want more of. If you've got one of those already, what you could do is focus in and zone in on that individual and actually use them as your example. So usually when I go through this exercise, I've got a couple of different questions, some open, some closed, in terms of the person. What I would say is important to note is not just their age and where they live and what car they drive, because some of those things are important, but some of them might not be universal to all of your customers. What you want when you're looking for universal characteristics is something that 80% of the time is true for your customer. Because if you're looking at something that's only personal to one or two people, that's not really going to help you draw or magnetize more inquiries of your ideal customer. So we're trying to focus on where do we spend the most amount of energy in order to get the best return, if you like. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And as soon as you said that, lots of other kind of thoughts or kind of reasons why I think this is so difficult for some people have come into my mind. And, it could be, well, okay, that's for 80% of my audience. Well, how do I even work out who they are? That's one question. And then the other question will be, well, yeah, but if I do that, what about the 20%? I want to be there for everyone.
I have an answer for that.
So we could go lots of different places on this one. But I first want to bring in Martin Buckland is in the house, waking up very, very early in the morning. I'm always impressed with you watching on LinkedIn. Yes, being like a laser when articulating messages on social media, and in particular streaming, is crucial to business success. Know your audience. So I'm trying to think, where's the best place to start with this? You tell me, where should we go?
Well, I think when you first start looking at your audience, like I said, if you can immediately first think of, so like for Ian, you've got a community as well. You've got a few different things I think that are going on. I think that's also probably where some people are a little bit wondering, where do they start, because they've got a few different avenues to their business. And would say is, before you even start an avatar exercise, you've actually got to think first about your value proposition and what your services and your products are. Okay, because what you could end up with is different avatars for different types of products, all right, or different services, and your community might be slightly different altogether as well. So I think you've really got to work out and make sure you're really sharp about your value proposition. And your value proposition is basically, what is the problem that you're solving? Who are you solving it for? And potentially, how are you doing it better than others? But that who are you solving it for is that important part, because you can't be everything to everyone.
And that is a very hard thing to swallow, but it's absolutely true. And this is the whole importance of niche, of having a niche. And a niche can be, it can be, obviously it can be what you're offering, but it can also be your audience as well. So it might be that you create live courses. Okay, that's one thing, but you also do it for entrepreneurs. That's very wide. Well, what type of entrepreneur? Okay. Is it female entrepreneurs, male entrepreneurs? Is it millennials? Is it so?
Okay, there's a few.
So I think that's really important to sort that out first, the value proposition. But then how do we then go about working out who our audience is?
Okay. So I think if you've worked out what your value proposition is and you know what your mix of your products is, the other question is actually, what is your business objective? So you might have an ideal customer avatar that buys like the least most valuable product, and actually from a business perspective, while you love them and you want more of them, they don't make commercial sense for you to try and grab more of them, if that makes sense. So they're not actually a perfect customer, they're like the safe option. So what you want to balance is actually, are you trying to grow or are you trying to increase your profitability? If you're trying to grow in terms of revenue, in terms of acquisition and getting new customers, be very, very clear then on what that customer is and then hone in on that. If, like I say, if you've already got one of those, that's fantastic. If you're not very sure about them because you might be fresh to the business, you like them, you're not terribly sure why you like them, you could even set up, feedback's really important. So what you could do is just try and find out a little bit more about them. Now, the things that are important from an avatar kind of sharpening perspective. So while there's kind of demographic bits, there is an element to age. Okay, there might be, but it might not be completely reliant for your product for them to be 25 and A, B, and C. It could be that age is not terribly important to what your avatar is. It might be that you've got to look at things like motivators, behavioral characteristics, disposable income. If your products are quite pricey, that automatically. Now, remember, this is not about shutting out everybody else. What it is about is filtering down where you focus your attention. You're not going to end up eliminating a bunch of people by filtering down your information. It's almost like, like a magnifying glass, when you, or a wide lens, and then you go in and you zoom in. You're not necessarily cutting out what's in front of you. What you're doing is just narrowing your focus of attention. The other thing I'd also say is, don't forget where the people are in their life cycle or their time of life, because it might be that your product or service is an aspirational product or service. So the kinds of people that you're trying to look for are people who are aspiring for a new need or a new something in the future, and those are the guys you want to tap into, not necessarily where they are right now in their lives or in their business.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So it could be your avatar is somebody who's, I don't know, making 200, 300K, but your audience that you're attracting might not be making that, but they want to make that. Is that kind of what you're talking about there?
Yeah, they could want to. And it could be that also gives you a bit of an indicator when we talked about your value proposition and your value ladder. So your value ladder is your mix of different products that you have, very clear different price points and things. And it could be that there's a gap in the market for, okay, you've got that product or service, but actually there's a bunch of people just underneath that which would love that product. So if you just step down and did a narrower, I think we had this conversation the other day, how can you maybe produce a product or a service or something that would actually satisfy their need, because actually they'll be the perfect avatar in the next year or two for your core product that you'd like to sell them for. So actually by doing this exercise, you almost get some insights into a product that you may be missing on your ladder as well, and help you with product development.
Yeah, definitely. I see different businesses doing it different ways. Some are very kind of subtle with their avatar. So their avatar might, for example, be a woman in her 50s, based in Florida or something, but actually they use that to kind of help them with their content, but they're not being obvious about, I work with women in America. Whereas I see some businesses are very, very clear about this. This is my business. I work with this type of person. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more in your thoughts on that, and why we want to do either?
Yeah, so I think you kind of do a bit of both anyway. So the whole idea of doing an avatar exercise is so that you can almost feel like you can invite that person to dinner and you know them so well. But when you know them so well, it means you know the kinds of questions that keep them up at night. You know the kinds of things that get them out of bed in the morning. You know the kinds of challenges or obstacles they have in their life or their work, whatever it is that your solution solves. It might affect either side of their business, depending on what it is that you do. So the whole idea of doing an avatar exercise is not just to know that it's a lady that's 50 that lives in Florida. I mean, that's what I call is like, a kid's coloring in book. That's the outline, but actually getting their characteristics, their buying behaviors, their decision-making, their challenges, their obstacles, that's the coloring in that makes the picture whole and makes the person a person.
That's really helpful. And because I think a lot of people think, myself included, when I've done avatar exercise in the past, that, well, you could give them a name. You could say their age, their gender, where they're based. Maybe if you're going to be very, very in depth, you might give them a salary. But what you're talking about is a lot more in depth. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we should be looking at when it comes to building our avatar?
Your avatar. I think some of those things are important that you mentioned already, because sometimes, again, it depends on your business, doesn't it? And it depends on the product that you're providing or the service you're providing, because sometimes age is a defining factor for your avatar, but sometimes gender is not even a defining factor for your avatar. It's just people in a specific time in their business or in their life that have these needs or these challenges. So the kinds of things you're wanting to be looking at is, okay, definitely disposable income, if that is a factor in your pricing, okay? But by focusing on it doesn't mean, again, you'll eliminate anyone. You're just getting really, really clear about the majority of people who would buy that product or service. But I would definitely look at characteristics like buying behaviors, attitudes, values. Values is it's a tricky one, but I think when you've done your brand strategy and you understand your own values and principles, you'll be able to quite easily start to eliminate parts of the public where you go, actually, those kind of individuals or those kind of businesses won't be interested in our product, because either they just don't agree with your values or it's not on their radar at all. So sometimes your values are something that will specifically attract a very specific audience. So that's quite helpful for you to know. But yeah, like I said, buying decisions, also customer experience, and what's important to people about the journey. So you said niche earlier, and I think for a lot of people, they think, oh crap, now I've got to think about what my specialism is. You don't, with niche or your USP, your secret sauce, you don't have to be original to the whole world. You just need to be unique to that customer. And that might be that you do something different to what somebody else does. And nowadays, the big differentiator is around customer experience. If you can identify a particular trait within your avatars where actually they're fed up with A, B, and C nowadays. Everybody expects more than that as a basic, especially now during the pandemic. Well, coming out of the pandemic now, it really shifted everybody's perceptions of actually what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and then also what's kind of standard now. Like, so anybody that's delivering anything lower than the basic standard of a service, so sometimes that's really helpful from a customer avatar's perspective as well.
I think personality obviously comes into this, particularly if you're a small business, a solopreneur, if we have to use that word, because, you're getting in front of the camera on a live video like this. You're working with, if you're a coach or a consultant, you're working with people, and you might not know as much as other people in your industry, but you might just have that particular personality that's attractive to your perfect audience. You might be more of a introvert. You might not be as kind of full of energy as some other people, but that is,
everyone's attracted to different approaches. Yeah.
So, sorry, you're going to say, Shelley?
No, it went out of my head. Continue.
Oh, well, there you go.
Oh, no. The one thing I was going to say is, the other thing is, if your avatars are businesses that are buying from you, that's another thing that people get a little bit stumbled on. Are they trying to do a profile on a business? Yes, potentially, because if whatever your product or service is only specific to a particular industry or size of business, that's important. But where you do need to look at is the individual, again, within the company that you end up working with. So the decision maker or the person that will be the one that actually be buying your product or your service, or if there is a particular influencer or a gatekeeper that would get you into the customer. That's if you deal with people like that, then you actually probably have to do a little bit of work on those people. Always go to the humans, don't go to the corporate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you work with corporates, you work with individuals within that, and you've got to find out, well, who are the people that are going to be making the decisions?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. So that's great. But I wonder whether some people watching and listening might start to be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, thinking, oh, okay, well, this is all great, but how on earth, Shelley, do I find out who my perfect audience is, who my my avatar is? Do I look at my favorite clients over the years, my favorite customers, or tell us, help us?
Yeah, I think you do look at favorite customers and clients. I see Nicola's just brought up values as well. Nicola Jackson, she's a coach. I think ultimately what you want to do is just make sure that you, like I said before, also commercially, it's got to make sense, the activity that you're about, this exercise that you're about to do. So what you don't want to do is go and do all of this work for an ideal customer that actually you don't have a product for in the future, or they're not going to help you with whatever your business objectives are in terms of acquiring new customers. So always make sure that it rings true. Yes, look at your previous customers and go, okay, but you got to be pretty black and white, I reckon, and objective, because while they might be nice people, are they ticking the other boxes of what makes them an ideal client? So an ideal client is someone who buys what you've got, they value what they've bought, they want more of whatever it is that you've got. For me, those are kind of like really good ideal customers, and obviously they become advocates for you, and they talk to their networks and their friends about you. That for me is like a really good, perfect customer or a client avatar. So you almost don't need to do too much marketing. But the idea of you doing this exercise is so that you can get to the point where you know what content you want to create for these guys. So you really, if you don't know them well enough, and say you've only been in business a couple of years and actually you're still trying to work out who your ideal customers are, what you could also do is maybe just set up some calls with your ideal customers or a couple of customers you have already, and maybe just start a conversation or try and get some feedback from them about what is it that they like about your product or your service. How did they feel beforehand? Almost like when you do case studies. And then potentially that might start to shift a little bit for you, so that actually you can start to work out, oh, okay, that's true. Like you were saying, Ian, like you don't know what your strengths are. You might not also know what those benefits look like of your solution. So you don't know how to put together a value proposition statement to say why you're good at what you do and who you serve. So if you're in that kind of space at the moment, go old school and have conversations with your customers at the moment that are paying you. And then you can kind of step back. You've got that information. You go, okay, that sounds good. All right, from that, I'm going to distill this. What's common with these couple of people that I've spoken to? And then you've almost got to start. You just need to start. I think that's the important part.
I love that. And I think you've taken people watching and listening from overwhelmed to something that, oh, yeah, actually, I can do that. And I love this from Nicola. So you mentioned Nicola, I think she said Nicola's a coach. So values are so important, she says. Working with people-focused organizations is really important to me.
Yes.
Now, for
so
some
Nicola's
people,
got a very clear avatar. I know her from one of my business things. So she's got she's done the work. She's gone like, these are the only types of individuals I want to speak to. And sometimes it's not that they're 5'4" and they're 56 and like that. It's actually more about them as humans. What are their values? What are their principles? And what are their desires or needs, in terms of what it is they're trying to do in their business lives or their lives.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I was thinking, so I saw Nicola's comment before you spoke, and I was thinking, well, values, so for me, like, values are really important, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to articulate that, or I haven't been able to articulate that. I know the kind of person, my clients tend to have certain values. But the best way is really to talk to them, and I think most of the time our audience, our clients, are going to be more than happy to jump on a call and tell us a bit more about themselves. I mean, who doesn't like to talk about themselves?
And also, what people forget, and I've had this with another client where I said, okay, well, are you sure he was trying to put together a product for, he goes, I want to do this. I'm like, okay, so what I want you to do is pick 5 clients and who you've told me that would love this. I want you to get on a call with them and ask them if they'd love this. And actually, when you start opening up those conversations, what you thought they needed kind of is true, but actually how you would sell it to them or market to them is actually quite different, because they tell you something completely different. Yeah. But by even having those conversations, you end up with more business, because you've actually sat in a 20-minute conversation with a client who might not have called in the past. So you really just get to know people so much deeper. And then once you know all of this information, that's when you come up with your themes, your topics, and your titles for your content. And then you can actually look at platforms and where are they. So don't worry about tactics. Don't worry about, does that mean they're here or there? Really focus on who these individuals are. And you can even ask those questions when you're on the calls with them and say, look, from a platform perspective, what at the moment, keeps your attention more? Where do you like to see things, and how do you like to digest information? Ask those questions. For some of you, that audience question in terms of digestion of content might be really, really relevant. And for others, they're like, we're a bit everywhere, so we're not so fussed, But there's starting to be quite a division, I think, across social media platforms now as to what's happening where. And if you want, you as a small business, you really need to choose one and go deep, but you really got to try and pick the one that's going to bring you what you're needing from an objective perspective in terms of getting new customers or building new, partners, affiliates, community. It depends on what your objective is as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful information, I think. And yeah, asking your clients where they hang out, it could be, or where they enjoy, and sometimes that might not necessarily be where you think. You might be surprised. Like for me, I know I need to do more research on this. I think that I work with men and women, but I think actually probably about 80-90% of my clients are women. They are 40 plus. They tend to hang out on Instagram, and which is slightly unfortunate because I don't particularly enjoy Instagram, but it's about what I do enjoy is hanging out with these people, and they, it's finding the community, and I think community is so important. Now, Martin Buckland, I like his view on this. I don't know what you think. It's just like a job search. Narrow it down to the key decision maker. I think that's for, particularly when working with with corporates.
With
Have you got any
businesses.
thoughts on if we do work more with corporates as opposed to solo businesses? How do we find out about those people? Because that's a little bit more tricky, I think.
Okay, there's a little bit of difference here, right? So when you're dealing with bigger business, I mean, corporate could be in anything, right? I mean, I don't do blue chip size companies because I feel like you're never part of a decision making process, and you'll always be a number on somebody's P&L. And I don't like working in that kind of environment. I feel, so one of my values is actually being involved in the business with the business owner from my perspective. So if you're in a similar situation where actually you do want to work with somebody who is a decision maker, then that's fairly easy in terms of trying to work out who that decision maker is and what their role is within the organization. But what I always try and say is just remember who's above them and who's below them. So who's above them? If they're a fairly senior manager, you're ending up with either the board of directors or, the executives above them. And then if there's anyone below them as potentially an influencer to them, whether it's an executive assistant or a junior account manager or something, they're quite easily someone to go, oh, have you seen this video? This dude, yeah, and he's quite smart, There's a little bit of an element of knowing that environment there. But what will then be important for you to understand is because your key decision maker, he or she or whatever would have to answer some very significant questions above in order to get a tick and a sign off in order to hire you. So they're not necessarily a decision maker. They are to a degree, but they need sign off from someone above. If they do, what I would say is when you do that avatar exercise, I would then think about that. And then you think about your value proposition and your benefits and everything that you put together. Make sure you have a version that uses different language that actually helps him sell it to the people above him.
That makes sense.
Use stakeholder language, all the big words.
Yeah.
Return on investment.
You need to learn all the lingo, otherwise you
learn all the lingo based on what your solution is that you would normally say to that person that you would work with, because they understand you, because they would work with you, but they'll also have to sell it to the above. So when you create that copy and that for him, make sure you're also creating a set of copy that's in the terminology and the words that the guys above understand more. So they'll actually say yes to him. It helps him. It makes his job easier. So he'll want to work with you.
Definitely. Now, like if you're still feeling overwhelmed, you don't need to do this on your own. This is something you can get help with. You can get in touch with Shelley. We'll give you some more details about Shelley, because Shelley can help you with these things as well. If you've just joined, welcome. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you have found out, if you've done some work on finding out your perfect audience or your avatar. So it's that's what we're talking about on this show. So yeah, let's move on to the next section.
You're listening to the Confident Live Marketing Podcast.
So Shelley, you've given us so many amazing things to think about here. When we're working on our avatar, and if we're interviewing our perfects or previous clients, our current clients that we enjoy working with,
we want more. Yeah,
and we want we've talked about questions such as like values, and I think what are the questions that we should be asking them. In particular, I'm interested in digging down a little bit further into what we mean by values, because some of these phrases, things like obvious things like gender, age, that's all very simple in a way, but when it comes to things like values and I don't know, even things like
things that are important
to
people.
Like to tell us, what are the kind of questions that we should be asking our clients. And
well, I think you kind of first have to know what yours are, though, don't you?
Well, that's true. That is true. So maybe that's the best question to ask. And this is kind of like a weird question. How do we find out what our values are?
Okay, I mean, there's lots of different ways to do a values elicitation. They're called values elicitation exercises. So Nicola's a coach, she's watching, a couple of other coaches and consultants will be watching. So I'm not a coach, but I have done the exercise myself with a coach, and I also do a very simplistic version within my program with brand owners. You almost you can start with a table of words, if you like, and then you look at those words and you go, okay, which of these words are mean the most to me or are important to me? And it could be things like adventure, bravery, diligence, competence. It could be a range of words, right? And then what you almost do is you kind of distill. You might start out and have circled 20, and then you'll whittle them down to 10. What I do say with clients is what's really useful is once you've kind of whittled down what you think are your like top 5, they're just basically words at this point, are the most important to you, like trust or honesty or transparency or diligence, whatever those things are. But then actually go back to your customers and your audience, or maybe not your customers. I'd probably do it more like professionals that know you, have known you for a while. It could be a couple of good clients that have known you for donkey's years and have worked with you for ages. They're a pretty consistent litmus test for you. And you go, I'm busy doing this exercise. This is what I think, this is what my values are. What would you attribute to me when you think of me or you work with me? What's your experience of me? And actually, they'll give you some feedback as well. And then you can kind of go, okay, we are the match really well. So they go, what's important to me seems to be reflecting really well. And they are identifying me as that, which is good. If there's a big difference, it might be just in terminology. So customers identifying a value by a different word. To like diligence, we had this example in my group yesterday, diligence and competence. So while the brand owner goes, competence is really important to me, it's something I really value, and then a customer goes, well, actually, I think you're quite diligent. To me, they're quite similar, but they're just slightly different meanings. So I think you've just got to work out what are the things that are important to you, what are the things that are non-negotiables. They're basically things that you would go to battle for because like the line is drawn in the sand. That makes sense. So those are your values, and you build those into your principles as a brand.
Now that makes sense. Now, something that I've been working on recently is personality, and I think personality comes into this. So I've been doing some personality tests. There's enneagrams, and then there's the big 5. So whether you're open or whether you're what are the words, introvert, extrovert, all those kind of things. And I think So maybe we might enjoy working with introverts or extroverts or people who are very creative people. Would you say that's kind of part of that, or what? It's just the word values to me would seem. I think
it's useful, but that when you're doing the values and the personality, you're almost trying to still work out what your brand strategy is. Who are you as a business? What do you want to be experienced as? Do you know what I mean? So that you're making sure that that's what's coming through when you're actually doing the business that you're doing. And when you're doing your customer avatar exercises, you almost got to try and find the customers that are going to resonate with you, the ones that you just definitely don't ever want to work with because it just wouldn't suit you at all. But I think it's overcomplicating things at the moment. I think the easiest place to start is if you already have customers that you really love working with and it's working well from a financial perspective as well, just always do a check-in that it fits in with the business objective. I've seen too many small businesses I really want to work with these guys. Like, yeah, but they're not paying you enough. And in order to do that, you need loads of them. Like, are you set up for that? Can you scale for that? Where you need loads of them in order for it to make business sense. Just make sure all the time it's business sense with you focusing on your customer avatars.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely vital. And I'm sure we could all share some stories of maybe when we first started out, we want to help everybody. And that was the case with me. I mean, I started off as a professional musician. And so when I set up my web agency, we set the web agency up to help professional classical musicians. The problem with that from a business point of view is that they have no money. And so like the web business, now we focus on businesses. We still do websites for musicians, but in a way it's what's the word?
a small segment of
very small segment, and they're kind of subsidized in a way by everything else that we do, and that's kind of like, because I feel like I enjoy doing that. But it's I think that is absolutely important, because you'll get burnt out if you keep working with people who do not pay you. Although you might want to help these people, you've also got to run a profitable business. Now, I love this, what Nicola says.
Yeah.
She talks about the word strengths. For me, she says, it's what really motivates you. What is it that gives you energy? So Ian, she says you should
bring
those strengths you discovered into it. And I love that. I think that's so true, because there are certain clients that I'm a coach and a consultant, that I really, really love working with. And it's really a case of working out what are those things, those aspects of the people that gives me the energy. Martin Buckland says, we are talking the crux of personal branding now. What is your differentiator? What is your value? What is your competitive edge? Why should I interact with you? Very interesting conversation.
Yes. There's always going to be an element of personal branding within any business branding, because whoever the owner is behind the brand, that, as Daniel Priestley calls them, the key person of influence, the KPI. So actually, if you're a one-man band at the moment, very much whatever your strengths are and your values are, it's quite baked into your business. So even if you grew going forward, that will always to a degree be true. So that's why I kind of start with your own values, because you naturally build them and bake them into your offering and what your brand is and what's going to be important to your business. Yes, you always add different things as you go along, but you start with that.
Definitely. Now, before we get on to more about the branding side of things, and also what should we then do with all this amazing knowledge we've got, I do want to talk about some things that people struggle with this. And I probably include myself in this, which is, I mentioned before that probably 80% of my clients are women, or female. Yeah. But I enjoy working with men as well. That's not, for me, is not the most important thing, but I do feel that my avatar probably should be a woman. But what are your thoughts on this when it comes to things like gender on the avatar?
I think the other thing we've got to remember, Ian, is how your audience is fairly big now, but it's thinking about how you ended up growing that audience, and it's almost kind of statistically was always going to be true to be female. Like working with particular entrepreneurs where you've done live production work within their communities, or even with, tool-based environments where you've been in the communities, or agent, you know what I mean? You would have been trying to grow your audience, if you like, within other people's audiences. So you kind of naturally anyway would end up with a proliferation, if you like, of that percentage of male versus female. I think the thing is, it's nice to recognize, so for example, you're saying about 80% of, is it your clients or your community? I'm not sure if one is the same as the other, maybe. Is that true?
You'd hope that would be the case, because that's the dream. And I think in my case, it's probably 60-70% female in my community.
In your community, and then your actual clients are generally female.
It's even more so. Well, yeah, it's not completely, but more so, yeah.
But more so, because don't forget, there's the world at large in terms of statistical who's out there and who's self-employed and who's in particular industries doing what. So I think there's an element to that as well. I think the only thing you got to remember is the only time it starts to make a difference is where you've decided, like you said, I prefer working with men. I do have female clients as well, and within my community as well. And online, I seem to have a lot more females following me than potentially males do, and it depends on the platform. But I don't necessarily want to be female only, because I like having the mix. I like having the difference between them. So the only time it starts to affect you is where you've decided that actually I only want to work with one or the other, whatever it is you've decided, or, however it is you're going to position the business, but it's going to affect your visual and your editorial guidelines. So that's the bit where, your brand strategy again comes through in terms of your brand experience. So the kinds of words that you use, the kinds of challenges that when you're doing your avatar and you're doing your female avatar, are there particular obstacles and challenges that they're having that the male avatar doesn't? There's no reason why you can't have the two avatars. The only time you're actually using the avatar stuff is when you're creating content and when you're potentially looking at product development, because in general, probably from your perspective, and the challenges are probably fairly similar. You solve a lot of people's challenges around confidence in front of the camera. So that's not really a gender thing. Well, I don't think it is. I think I've met from both sides where they're having issues with being in front of the camera. Some of it is a technical thing, in terms of them being able to actually technically set up to do their live shows and how do they go about it. So I think for you, there's a crossover quite simply there. The thing you've got to decide is when you're choosing your brand, you're choosing your messaging, your colors, your use of fonts. If you only want to actually only attract females going forward and only men, that's going to affect how you paint your picture in terms of you as a brand. And then similarly, if you don't want to eliminate one or the other, you've got to choose a neutral ground where you're not. So for me, you'll see with my branding, very bold, very bold colors. I've got a little bit of a hand script here and there, but what I didn't want was pink and gray and flowery. I want to be able to attract both male and female customers as well.
Yeah, got that
in my old Agora Pulse show, which Emmerich's probably going to shoot me for. It's the old branding.
Oh dear, that's the phone going off. Let's switch that off. Oh, annoying when that happens. But yes, that's what you should always do. Switch the problem is that's the landline, and I haven't actually worked out how to
the wall.
Yeah, I should, but then that switches all the phones off in the entire house. So I need to work out the best thing there. It's annoying. It's an interesting thing. I mean, this is a whole other topic of conversation, which we probably get into another time. But it's interesting, the whole male-female thing, because we're getting into gender stereotypes here. And like my daughter, for example, her favorite color is blue, and and I think there are some men who have more female characteristics, and some more women that have more. Yeah. I actually kind of. I kind of like working with well, it's a whole other topic of conversation.
It really is. But actually, it just affects your and from a graphic designer perspective, when you're trying to instruct a graphic designer around who your target audience is, they will be asking you these things as well. Yeah. So they will specifically go for more neutral ground, which doesn't mean boring. It's just meant there's a very specific way in which you choose fonts. There's a very specific way in you choose colors. So it actually really helps your website designer as well as your graphic designer if they're very clear on who you try and I'm generalizing by saying pink and flowery, but it's not that, you know what I mean? I'm being a bit extremist to explain the difference between the two. But it'll also come down to editorial guidelines as well as to how you use your words, what terminology you use. That would resonate more, but mainly based on there might be slightly different motivators within your male or your female avatars as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so you've actually answered a lot of the kind of questions I was going to ask you, which is about once we've come up with our avatar, then what do we then do with it? And so you've used words like the typography, the colors, the branding, the words that we use. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about? For example, I mean, obviously this is the Confident Live Marketing Show. We talk a lot about how we can utilize live. Once we've worked all of that out, how can we use our knowledge of our avatar in our live shows?
Well, very simply, like the topic. Immediately the topic of what you're going to talk about on your live show. So when you've done your custom avatars, if you're doing a full exercise, I extend that into a content marketing roadmap, if you like. So we go through what are your top themes of content. So that's almost like if you think about your podcast show, like you've got your 3 top themes, don't you, in terms of what you cover within your live show. So by knowing your avatar, you'll know that those are the top 3, and then within those top 3 you'll have almost like little subdivisions which are called the topics, And then within the topics, because some of the topics might be quite meaty, you might end up with a couple of titles under each one of the topics as well. So ultimately, your avatar exercise is actually giving you the ideas of, blog posts, or if you're doing your live show, what your topics of your live show are. And also in terms of then finding the right guests so that they're going to suit your audience and what it is that they need to hear.
Awesome. Well, we are almost out of time, Shelley. I know there's probably so much more we could talk about. Is there anything that we've missed? Anything vital before we finish? Because I know you got your big list of
yeah,
notes.
I got my big list. Let me just double check we didn't, because we talked about it a little bit behind us.
Yeah.
It's just mainly make sure you're also looking at people's behaviors, their buying or their decision making routes. It's not just about their characteristics, so have a look at communities they're in as well that might be relevant for you as well. And don't just start as well. Don't get too overwhelmed. Just start, like we said, and choose a good existing customer that you love. Get on a call with them, and then eventually over time you'll start to learn what it is about you that they enjoy, that they buy into. Otherwise, I think we've pretty much covered as much as we can.
I think so. I think, well, you'll just have to come back on the show. So having a working document, I think, is important, whether it's a Google Doc or a pen and paper, and start jotting this stuff down about who you think your audience is. And it might change over time. So some of the things that we've been talking about today, just as a reminder, talk with, it could probably not family, but friends in your industry who know you well, or it could be clients. Ask them more about you and what makes you you, and then start to interview your audience as well, and ask them questions that's going to help you formulate who your avatar is, and do this over time. Anything else in that list that you would like to add?
Yeah, I would just change, and then try and remember what we said between try and define what's a universal characteristic and actually what's just personal to somebody. And I kind of have a 80-20-ish kind of rule around this. So if you're looking at something that's really personal, like it might be the only reason they'd buy from you is because there's been a huge disruption in their life, and therefore they will put you. It's quite personal to that individual. So it's not going to be good for you to kind of focus on those little characteristics that are only kind of personal to a few people. Try and focus on the things that are more general to most of your dream customers, and so that you can focus your attention more, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, the best place for people to find out more about you, of course, is your website, which is shelleyröstlund.com. And I'll spell it SHELLEY. So there is an extra E in there. ROSTLUND.com. But the link will be in the show notes at iag.me/155. And where's the best place for people to follow you on the socials?
On socials, I'm trying to be good with Instagram, so have a bash over there. But I'm generally on LinkedIn quite a bit. I've been on Twitter for years as well, but basically LinkedIn and Instagram. I am on Facebook as well, but probably Instagram and LinkedIn.
That's where
the links will all be on the website as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, you have also got this quite a cool brand strength quiz. So tell us more about this.
Yeah, so if you fancy this, guys, you can decide whether you're a misfit, a magician, or a maven. So by doing this quiz, what I do is help you try and work out what your brand strength is at the moment, where you are right now in your business. And then I give you the top 3 things that you need to focus on right now, because actually we're small businesses. We can't do everything perfectly. So what you can do is focus on the things that are important right now for where you are, because you can build on that for the future. So if you go do the quiz, you can find out whether you're a misfit, a magician, or a maven. Which one do you think you are, Ian?
Can you be a combination? I don't know.
I have a tipping point. There's a tipping point. I've got tipping magicians. So from misfit to magician.
I think somewhere in between misfit and magician, I think is probably what I am. I don't know.
Yes. And Yes, sorry.
I was just going to ask you, would you agree with that? Do you think, knowing me, do you think I might be somewhere in between those, or shall I just have to do the exercise?
I think you are between. For me, actually, this is part of my customer avatar exercise. So what I've done is I've taken my avatar and I kind of split them along their brand journey.
Right.
So I know
Cool.
misfits, they'll do the quiz, but they might not yet be magicians who are perfect for my brand compass program, my group program. But I know that all they need to do is do a few more bits, and within a year or two, they'll be perfect. And then the mavens are probably the ones that kind of want to go for VIP kind of, you know what I mean? But they are the similar kind of avatar, but on different parts of their journey. So that's when you can do cool things like create quizzes and profiles and tests when you've gotten to know your audience a lot better.
Interesting. We're going to have a look at it. It depends on the definition of a misfit. I just feel I'm a misfit. Because
it does mean you're cute and mischievous, Ian. So don't worry.
There we go. There we go. That's good. So if you want to do that, then go to shelleyröstlund.com/brand-quiz, and the show notes will have all of these links. So you don't need to worry about any of that. Well, thank you so much, Shelley. We are out of time. It is on the hour now, but thank you so much for helping us today with this. I can see Reg was saying this is a really great, valuable show and would love a part 2. Well, there you go. Thank you, Reg. And Lisa on Facebook says, thanks for a great show, Ian and Shelley.
Thanks, Lisa.
It's been great. Well, thank you so much, Shelley. And that's it for this. Well, I was going to say for this week, there's actually going to be a show on Thursday if you're watching live. And of course, the podcast comes out every Friday. If you want to find out more about that, go to iag.me/podcast. That's iag.me/podcast. Well, that's it for this week. And until next time, I encourage you to level up your impact, authority, and profits through the power of Confident Live Video. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks for watching the Confident Live Marketing Show with Ian Anderson Gray.
Make sure you subscribe at iag.me/podcast so you can continue to level up your impact, authority and profits through the power of live video.
And until next time,
Toodaloo.